Hey, Doug Giles here, Warriors and Wildmen. Got my good buddy Rich here. Rich, what's shaking?
Hey, Doug, what's happening? Excited to be here on Warriors and Wildmen, causing a ruckus.
That's what we do every week, man. Ruckus Radio. Or what's Pugnacious Podcast. I guess that's what it's called.
I like that.
It's not a radio show. Hey, let's talk about helping the little squabs get through the difficulties to seeing God's will fulfilled, their vision, their purpose here on earth. Because I'm hearing a lot of stuff, Rich, and I know that you and I have talked about it extensively, about the poor little poodles. I'm talking about the pusillanimous snowflakes that curl up in the fetal position and wet their big evangelical diaper once they go through a molehill in the Garden of Eden. And I'm here to tell you, little babies, that if you're going to find, follow, and finish your course in life, it's going to be rougher than Grandma's breath. And it's supposed to be rough, Rich. It's supposed to be difficult. That's what makes it great. That's what makes it good. And I'm telling you what, brother, I am so sick of hearing all these people, again, whining about crap, Rich, that shouldn't even be on their radar. Yep. And it concerns me, man, that, they're not going to, when everybody's talking about, I've got a destiny, I've got this purpose in life. Listen, that stuff is fraught with rocks, valleys, hurdles, failures, and man, you got to have the resilient hide of an alligator or rhinoceros, and you got to have the tenacity of the pit bull to see it through, or you ain't gonna make it, man. I don't care how many stupid Christian songs you sing, how much time you spend on Rich's couch getting counseling. If you don't have internal drive and motivation, and we've got at our disposal the power of the Holy Spirit that raised Christ from the dead. I was just going to say that. You ain't going to make it. You're just not going to make it, little pussy. You got to have tenacity, persistence, and all that good stuff that you don't hear diddly squat about in church anymore.
Yeah, we got to suck it up if we're going to make it. When I first started going to church, I was going to this little church, and it was less than 50 people, and they had testimony time every week. And I was a brand new Christian, man. I was fired up. And during testimony time, people would stand up and they'd say, well, I'm having a hard time this week and somebody's persecuting me. They said something mean to me at work and, things like that. And it wasn't testimony time, which testimonies are powerful, man. I'm good. I want to hear what people go through and they make it, what God did in their life. I'm good with that. But it literally became whining and crying time. And so I stood up one day during testimony time and thought I'd share a little. And I said, there's a guy that I work with in the Army. I wasn't in the Army, but I was testing weapons for a contractor. And the guy that I work for, his name was, I'll think of it in a second. Man, I just lost his name. But he was a major, and he was crazy. He was wild. This guy was intense. And then this guy said all kinds of awesome stuff that I think maybe some of it could have made it to the Bible even, But one of the main things that he would say was just suck it up. And so I stood up and said, hey, you guys stand here, supposed to be testimony time. All I hear is crying. It's time to suck it up, like Major would say at work. And apparently that wasn't popular. It made a lot of people mad because they want to be comforted in crying time. That's not testimony time. It's crying time. There's a time for crying time. It ain't during church. We're trying to get people motivated to do this thing. People are doing that all the time. That's what Facebook's for. Hey, everybody, I don't feel good.
Yeah. That's a whole nother podcast. But I remember, man, when I became a Christian, I didn't want to be a Christian. I thought Christians were pussies. The ones that I bumped up against at high school and junior high, they didn't seem like rough and tumble dudes or dudettes who carved, a niche through a mountain. It seemed like it was for the weak. It seemed like it was for the loser. And lo and behold, my sins, Rich, became too grave, too deep. I was getting too convicted. So I bowed the knee, man, and Christ drugged me in by his beautiful grace that I couldn't resist. And boom, I land up in church. So remember, I had those mindsets coming into this thing that is full of weak people who couldn't get a life. And so they joined Christ's quote-unquote army. And lo and behold, man, when I rocked up to the first home group of the big church that I was going to, I was right. Everybody in there, like you said, is crying. The testimonies is, oh, thank God there's only 24 hours in a day. If there had been a 25th, I wouldn't have made it. And I'm sitting here thinking, I just got my life completely changed. I just, through the power of God, stopped boinking chicks every weekend, stopped doing cocaine, stopped dropping LSD. I used to have a bong attached to my right hand like a frickin' appendage. All of that stuff, boom, it drops on December 7th, 1983. And I'm listening to these people who are talking about, again, tiny little speed bumps in life that they can't get over. And all my assumptions about Christianity and it being for weak, just god-awful folks that you wouldn't want to have your picture taken with on Facebook, they were right. And I rarely heard, Rich, anybody talking about, you know what? I was down for the count. A giant faced me in a valley of Elah. There was surrounded by 10,000 horsemen and chariots, and I frickin' came out there kicking butt and taking names for God. I can tell you right now, man, in 20 years sitting in that place, I have heard that testimony maybe 5 times compared to the 5 million times that, thank God there's only 24 hours in a day. If there had been a 25th, I wouldn't make it. And I'm telling you what, that's blasphemy. That does nothing for Christ's name. It's a horrible example for people out in the world. Come join the losing team is the message to me. And I think that's anti-biblical bullshit.
How do you feel about that, Doug?
Yeah, strongly. Yeah,
well, it's the truth, though, because for everybody that's an overcomer, you're going to have people that are... Now, I'm not saying they're not trying to overcome. Look, we're all going to go through it. We're all going to go through stuff. It's going to be tough.
That's what makes it great.
But here's the deal. You have to be overcoming. You can't be complaining and making a reason why you need to stay there either.
And that's why the mountains are there for you to speak to, for you to go over, for you to blow through. It's not for you to describe how big it is.
Well, that's what Jesus said. If you speak to the mountain in faith and you don't doubt, you can cast it into the sea. And the problem is too many people, because the mountain represents our problems, obstacles, trials, whatever. Too many people are talking about the mountain and not talking to the mountain. And I've said this so many times before. They'll get sick and they'll tell you about their sickness. They know more about their sickness and about the drugs they're taking for their sickness than they do about what the Bible says about their healing. They know more about their sickness than the doctor. They talk about it like they're so excited because they're an expert on sucking. It's like, hey, maybe you ought to read a couple verses in the Bible and memorize a couple verses on being healed. And even if you don't get healed, go out like a champion, man. Don't go out like a sniveling clod of ailments crying because the world isn't bowing down to make you happy.
I was in West Palm Beach preaching at a church about 20 years ago when I was in the ministry. And this guy was telling me, a buddy of mine who's a pilot for American Airlines, he's telling me about the graduation ceremonies at Wheaton College, which I don't know if it's still an evangelical college, used to be back then. And there was this Korean dude that had almost had his life snuffed out, having the crap beat out of him for, I think, 12, 15 different times. And he was a keynote speaker. And they had some typical evangelical clod get up and speak before he did. And the guy's moaning and groaning on about how difficult life's been and how he's just barely there and how he's, like that kitty hanging on by one claw, until it's Friday. And, just a complete defeatist type mindset. And the guy's still just droning on and going and going. And the Korean dude who's been persecuted and had the crap beat out of him, he stops him in mid-flow and he goes, excuse me. You must sit down now because you're not saved whatsoever.
Yes.
Yes. The guy's like, you're not even converted, man. I don't even know what you're talking about. You're going through a fraction to what me and my buddies have plowed through, thanks to the North Koreans and the persecution that's come down on them in that DMZ zone. And he calls them out. He's like, excuse me, sir. You're not saved whatsoever. Can you imagine?
Yeah, but that's how it is. And what you were referring to 2 Corinthians chapter 4, it says this. I want to read these verses because you don't hear a lot preached on these. We are pressed on every side by troubles, but we're not crushed. We're perplexed, but we're not driven to despair. We're hunted down, but never abandoned by God. We get knocked down, but we're not destroyed. Through suffering, our bodies continue to share in the death of Jesus, so that the life of Jesus may also be seen in our bodies. Yes, we live under constant danger of death because we serve Jesus. It's awesome. There it is right there. We're knocked down. Hey, we're down, but we're not out.
Yeah, it's a Chumbawamba song, right? Remember back in the day in the early 90s? I get knocked down, but I get up again. Ain't nothing going to keep me down. That ought to be saying.
Oh, I thought you were talking about the one that said, Mama says knock you out.
Well, that'll work too. I think we ought to, or the Tom Petty song, Stand My Ground.
Yeah.
You can set me up at the gates of hell and I'm going to stand my ground. I won't back down. That's the kind of chutzpah, that's the kind of stuff that you little pipsqueak, pusillanimous, pussified evangelicals, again, that are crying about going over molehills in the Garden of Eden, that's the kind of stuff you ought to find a pastor, you ought to find a podcast like ours that jacks that stuff into your soul because, listen, man, you can be dreamy, you can desire great things in life and do something substantial, but if you don't get on the outset that this crap is not going to be easy, it's going to be difficult, man, I'm telling you, the weakest, stupidest, nastiest, impish little demon's going to be able to derail you once they tackle you.
Well, let me throw this out there. This is I preach a message on this based from a counseling session. I don't do counseling anymore because I'm not good at it because we're counseling too many things that we should be casting out. Cheers. But anyway, so I was talking to this couple and I got this concept. The guy said, I don't think I'm going to make it. And I said, quit then.
Yeah.
And he looked at me and said, what? I said, quit. And he's like, what are you talking about? I said, quit, you freaking quitter. And he got all offended and he goes, well, I can't quit. I said, well, now that we've established that, let's stop talking about it. Here's the deal, man. You get cancer, you don't get to quit. I quit. Cancer doesn't go away. It's not a game. You're going through bankruptcy. You don't get to quit. Bills don't go away. You know what I'm saying? Whatever you quit, you say, I'm going to quit. Quitting is this thing that we all want to talk about. Well, I'm just trying not to quit. Quitting is not an option. You're like, I don't want to serve Jesus anymore. It's too hard. I'm going to quit. Your problems don't go away. And doing them without Jesus doesn't make it better. So I preach a whole message called Quit, Quitter. And I said, once we've established that quitting is not an option, let's stop talking about it. So I can't quit because there's no such thing. So I'm going to suck it up and I'm going to do what I have to do. Be a champion, man. Everybody goes through hell. And you know the famous saying, when you're going through hell, don't stop. Keep going. You're going to make it if you don't quit. If you don't quit, you win.
Well, here's a little test to find out if we're talking to, on the Warriors and Wildmen podcast, people are going to be overcomers or they're going to be like Rich just blasted, you know, the quaint little quitter. Number one, podcast listener, do you complain often? Is that you? Are you always bitching and moaning about life? You're never going to make it if you're a complainer. Here's another one, Rich, that's juicy. Do you avoid association with people that are greater than you?
Hey.
That's something else that's going to drag you through incredible storms. Rich, I know you've dealt with it for years. I have to a lesser extent because I haven't been in the ministry as long as you have. But I tell people all the time that are going through marital crap, financial crap, if they're having problems seeing their vision roll out in a powerful and profound way, is you've got to get around people who trump you in regards to their accomplishments, who have the great marriage, who have the great family, who have the great vision and business ideas, because whoever you're hanging out with heretofore has brought you to this crossroads to where you're blocked.
That's right.
So you got to have that internal fortitude, and you got to have the humility to go,
well, on your first
I'm in a conundrum. I don't know what to do now.
On your first point, you said, don't be complaining. You know what's funny about that? I've been there. Here's testimony. I've been there. I've gone through some hard stuff, and I found myself complaining, saying negative stuff, complaining, griping about the situation. And you know what happened, Doug? I got disgusted with myself. I literally laid down in bed at night and thought about the things that I said, and I was literally disgusted with myself. And I was like, I'm not going to live like this. It's not that we don't do these things. You might do those things. But at some point as a Christian, you're going to have to get some conviction and get up on over it. Maybe you've been hanging out with sucky people. Well, it's time to go, hey, Doug just said I need to hang out with people that are better than me if I want to get better. Well, time to get over yourself, time to get over your pride, and time to get over Easy Street and start hanging out with some champions that put pressure on you.
Here's another thing, Rich, that I know you're going to jump on like stink on a monkey is people who aren't overcomers, who aren't going to make it, who are probably going to end up quitting. They often feel this thing, Pastor, called self-pity. Poor little you. Not only do they complain often, but it's constantly, soul stroking themselves that, life's not fair, something, shouldn't have happened to me that happened. Listen, guys, I don't know if you've skipped the book of John, but like in, I think it's John 16, verse 33, Jesus said, in this world, you're going to have this thing called tribulation. But cheer up. I've overcome this world. And Rich, like you said, when I get into that complaint zone, when I'm feeling self-pity, oh, so-and-so did me wrong, I start listening to how I would sound if I was talking to me. And I know that the Doug counselor, the Doug drill sergeant, would kick my ass if I started talking and complaining self-pity overtones. I wouldn't tolerate it from anybody, but I tolerate it sometimes from me because I love me. And we need to do like David did. He said, bless the Lord, O my soul, and all that's within me. It's like David took an outside objective stance against his internal subjective David.
Right.
And he's like, hey, wuss, get up. You got to believe. You can't pity yourself. You can't cry. And look, get it out, right? I mean, do it for what, 30 seconds, a minute? And then get constructive.
Come on.
And stop the pity party and the complaining.
And then people are going through trials. That's what you need friends for. You talk to a friend. You open up to them. You break it down. This is what I'm going through. It's rough, All right, we get that. We need to be there for each other. And then a good friend says, and now what?
Yeah, how are we going to fix this?
And then what? I have a friend that just recently went to a class for people that have drinking problem. And the guy asked him, what are your goals? And he said, well, these are my goals right here. And the guy looked at him and he said, then do it then. And my friend was like galvanized. It didn't discourage him. He said, then do it then. And he looked at him and the guy said, do it. And he got fired up. And when he was telling me about it, he said this, Doug, this is going to be a revelation. I'm going to do it. The guy didn't sit there and baby him. It's like, what are your goals? This is where we're at. This is what I want to do. Then do it then. Come on, that's what friends need to do. We need to do that to each other. We get it. We're down. We're bummed out. Do like David. Why are you so downset? Cast, oh my soul. And then he turns around and says, I will yet praise the Lord. I'm out of here, man. I am not going to stay in this condition.
It's interesting things. My brother, who's clinical psychologist, got his PhD, used to do hostage negotiation for the Texas prison system when they'd get into a kidnap. Somebody got the warden type lurch.
That's a pretty cool job.
Yeah, no, it was great. He had enough of it, though, as you can imagine, Texas prison systems for 20 years. So, in his private practice, he's got this very proactive approach to counseling people. And he said that if it doesn't work, I don't know if he's shortening it now, but a couple of years ago, he's like, if you're not well within a year, then obviously you're not listening, or what I'm saying is not working. Where most psychologists and psychiatrists, they'll string you on for 20 years, man.
Building their clientele, man.
Yeah, not only that, they're building their vacation home in Hawaii, and they're getting that second Lamborghini, for their beach home in South Florida.
Want you on that monthly payment.
I did a painting, about 20 years ago of a wildebeest, a female wildebeest, a cow is what they call them, and it was about her giving birth to the little baby wildebeest as they're going through the Serengeti in that massive, epic National Geographic type slap your mama migration. And guess what, Rich? How many minutes, not days, not months, not weeks or years, how many minutes the mother wildebeest gives her little offspring? I'm talking newborn, covered with effluents, umbilical cord still dragging the dirt. Guess how many minutes she gives that wildebeest to get his shit together before she takes off and leaves him?
How long?
15 minutes. She'll nudge him.
Welcome to the real world.
She'll nudge him. She'll lick the effluents off of him. She'll, get the boogers out of his eyes and all that other stuff. And you got 15 minutes, because if you don't get your act together, then you're going to jeopardize the whole herd. Rich, tell me with a straight face that won't preach in the sassy, squishy, Evangelifish circles.
It'll preach. It'll get them to listen to it, but they won't come back because they don't want to hear that at all. Hey, I have this theory, Doug. I have 4 kids. I know you have a couple kids yourself. And, the babies are born, and the doctors spank the babies. I guess they don't do that now because they don't believe in that. But they spank the baby, and the baby starts crying. And I noticed one time, this. Let me throw this out there. This is fictional. But I noticed that the doctor was whispering something to the babies after he spanked them, and I didn't know what it was. So by the time I had my 4th child, my son Luke, the doctor takes the baby, spanks him, and he whispers, and I lean close to hear what he says. And you know what he says, Doug?
Tell me.
It's from Matrix. Welcome to the real world, baby. You know what happens? You're in that womb. Everything's wonderful. You have no problems. Climate controlled. Everything you need. Mommy's taking care of you. You get plenty of rest. You get plenty of vitamins. You get all the food you need. Everything's perfect. And then guess what happens? You are all of a sudden forced out.
Bam!
And then your head's misshapen, somebody's smacking you around, and you should have known from that first day that this is not a walk in the park. This is the real world. Quit whining and crying that everybody's not bound down to make you happy. Suck it up, buttercup.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the children of Israel, they're in the wilderness, and they've got air conditioning during the hot days, and they've got, fire and warmth at night, and frickin' foods, falling, from heaven, and they're drinking water out of a rock, and all this stuff that's, part and parcel of living in a Christian playpen. And then all of a sudden, mean old Moses starts talking about, them going to this promised land where it flows with milk and honey, which I don't care about milk and honey, but I guess, if you really like milk and honey, that sounds like a great time and stuff. It said it was flowing with double rifles and like Harley motorcycles. Okay, I
on
can
our
dig
way.
I'm not lactose intolerant. I'm just not a big milk and honey type guy. But anyway, so they take them through this wilderness, and where they're getting free candy and free food, and it's kind of like the Democratic Party. And the next thing you know, for them to get what God has for them in the quote-unquote promised land, where they have grapes the size of women's breasts, they've got to go through this thing called fighting giants who possess the land. And it goes from being coddled and nursed right into your midlife crisis to frickin' fighting, 9-foot-tall Nephilims, or whatever they call them, that are fire-breathing monsters. And again, that's the message that's lost on the little Christian tinkerpot, is that between you and the promised land is A, a wilderness, and B, giants after that. Yeah, it can get worse, so never think that it can't get much worse.
That's good, Doug. Check this out. Here's a thought on that. Here's some good Bible stuff. So God gives them this promised land, and it's perfect, right? Except it's not perfect. Except it is perfect. Except it's not, but it is. Has everything they want, everything they need, but there's a problem. Giants in the land. Well, did God forget about those giants? Or was God cursing them? Or, here's the real question that no Christian ever wants to hear. Or did God leave the giants there for them? To develop them? To make them into the champions that they're called to be, instead of whining little. You know what? The promised land was perfect, including the giants. The giants were there to bring out the conqueror inside of God's people. And the problems in your life are not things that God did to you. He planned it for you to make you better, to bring out the greatness inside of you, so that you're not a spoiled little whiny, crybaby, weak, good-for-nothing Christian, but you're an overcomer and you're a champion, and you can teach other people how to slay giants.
Beautiful. Rich, I think that's
all I got to say about that.
I think that's the greatest final rant for this broadcast. I'm gonna wrap it up with a little Dougism. Here's how we're gonna find out, little tinkerpot, if you're gonna make it. You got to have a definite purpose backed up with a burning desire to see it fulfilled. It's the only way you're going to do it. So you can talk about during fellowship at church, covered dish dinners, man, little home group, and y'all are kumbayaing, and you got your skinny jeans on and your deep V-neck T-shirt and your man bun, which I also call a douche knot, and you can say how God's going to do this for you, and you got this dream, and you got this destiny, He shall fulfill on that city on the hill. And the thing that you got to realize, man, between A and Z is how many letters, Rich? 24, 25? I went to public school. I don't know. Yeah, or 24 various mountains and valleys that only the overcomer who's got that kind of tenacity and persistence is going to get to that end of the road to where he can say, like Paul said, I finished my course. I kept the faith. I've got a crown laid up for me. I didn't, I got knocked down. Sure. Were there troubles? You bet. Did some of them suck worse than an airplane toilet? Yeah, and yeah. But you know what? Here I am. God got me through. And it's these surmounting difficulties that makes people heroic.
Yeah. That's good stuff, Doug.
That's all I got,
stuff.
buddy.
And we don't have to do it by ourselves. God's there to help us. Holy Spirit's inside of us. You don't have to do
I'll
it on
help
your
you,
own.
Rich.
And that's what I was going to say. And then we got brothers to help us along the way. Come on, we can make it.
Bro, I can't underscore this enough to the Warriors and Wildmen listener. Man, you better take note who's around you and what kind of character they have, because the shit will hit the fan. And you have got to be with people who will stand by you through thick and thin, who will dust you off, stand up for you, stand on top of you if they have to. And those kind of people. And they're hard to find, Rich. They're difficult to find. But they're out there, man. And those churches are out there.
A good friend will stand up for you when you're against you. They'll stand against you because you're against you. A good friend gets in your business so that you can make it when you're doing stupid stuff. You're right, Doug. You got to have great people around you, man. Hey, there's no excuse. We have everything we need to make it.
Rich, that's it, buddy. What do the Warriors and Wildmen podcasters need to do, big dog?
Need to go to the Warriors and Wildmen podcast. Subscribe. Download it. Leave a comment. If you love us, we love you back. If you hate us, well, the Bible says we have to love our enemies, but we'll probably make fun of you on the next episode of Warriors and Wildmen.